The fluorescent lights of Kepler Station flickered across the auction platform like dying stars. The station was enormous, a massive orbital marketplace built around a dying asteroid, and it hummed with the sounds of thousands of beings buying and selling goods, and living creatures. Today was an ordinary day on Kepler Station, which meant it was a day of suffering for someone. A young Felinox female stood on the raised platform, her small frame barely visible beneath the heavy chains that bound her wrists and ankles. Her name was Lyra, though the slavers rarely called anyone by their real names. They called her Lot 247, or the Cat Thing, or simply, It. Her violet eyes were wide with terror, and tears streamed down her feline face, leaving dark trails on her fur. Her pointed ears, which should have stood proudly, were flattened against her head in a gesture of complete submission and fear. The crowd around the auction block was diverse and ugly. There were Vrelians with their scaled purple skin and cold reptilian eyes, looking at Lyra the way a human might look at a tool they wanted to buy. There were human merchants too, men and women in expensive suits who had abandoned any sense of morality long ago. There were creatures whose species Lyra did not even recognize, beings from worlds she would never see, all gathered here for one purpose: to own something they could control. The slaver conducting the auction was a fat human man named Gordon. He had a voice like gravel and a smile that showed yellowed teeth. He stood beside Lyra with his hand on her shoulder, pressing down hard enough to make her wince. The other slavers around him laughed at her distress. They laughed the way cruel people laugh when they see something hurting. Lot 247, Gordon announced, his voice booming across the platform through ancient speakers. A fine specimen of Felinox. Young, healthy, excellent strength for labor work. Clean medical records. No genetic defects. She is obedient, trainable, and perfect for domestic service, factory work, or breeding purposes. The Felinox are known for their intelligence and their beauty. This one has both. What is your opening bid, gentlemen? Lyra's entire body shook. She had been born on a planet called Felinia Prime, a world of green forests and blue oceans where her people lived in harmony with nature. She had a mother named Stella and a father named Robert. She had a younger brother named Thomas. She had dreams of becoming a scientist, of studying the stars and understanding the universe. She had been happy once before the raiders came. The slavers had attacked her colony 3 years ago. They had destroyed her home, killed her father, and separated her from her mother and brother. She did not know if they were alive or dead. She only knew that she had been on ships and in cages ever since that day. She had been sold 5 times already, and each owner had been worse than the last. Now she stood on this platform on this distant space station about to be sold for the 6th time, and she could not stop crying. A bid came from the crowd. A Vrelian trader raised his hand. 500,000 credits, he called out. Gordon nodded eagerly. 500,000 for this beautiful creature. Do I hear more? Another bid came. A human woman in the crowd, someone who looked like she ran mining operations, offered 600,000. Then another bid came from someone Lyra could not see. 700,000. Then 800,000. The bids kept climbing higher and higher. Each time a new bid came, Gordon would look down at Lyra and smile. He would press his hand down on her shoulder harder. The other slavers would laugh. The crowd would laugh. Lyra's tears would flow faster. She understood what was happening. The higher the bids went, the more valuable she was. The more valuable she was, the more someone important wanted to own her. And if someone important owned her, then her life would become something unimaginable. The Vrelian trader had not bid just to own her for labor. Lyra had heard stories about what happened to Felinox who were sold to Vrelians. She did not want to think about those stories. She did not want to imagine what would be done to her. The bids reached 1 million credits. Then 1.2 million. The crowd was excited now, sensing that something special was happening. A Felinox this young and beautiful was rare. Most of her kind were worked to death or died in captivity. The fact that Lyra was still alive and relatively healthy made her valuable. Gordon was sweating now, grinning with the kind of happiness that only greedy people feel when they are about to make a lot of money. 1.5 million, he announced. Do I hear 1.6 million for this fine specimen? A scarred Vrelian crime lord in the front row raised his hand. His smile was the smile of someone who did not see Lyra as a person. He saw her as a possession like a piece of furniture or a tool. He saw her as something to own and control and use. His smile made Lyra's blood go cold. 2 million credits, the crime lord said. The crowd gasped. 2 million was an enormous amount of money. Whoever this creature was, he was willing to pay more than anyone else. Lyra felt her hope dying. She had heard stories about the Vrelian crime lord. She knew his name was something horrible and unpronounceable. She knew he was cruel and dangerous. She knew that if he owned her, she would never see another sunrise or star. Her life would become a nightmare that would never end. Gorton looked out at the crowd with anticipation. His gavel was raised, ready to bring it down and finalize the sale. 2 million credits for lot 247. Do I hear higher? 2 million once. 2 million twice. Going once more. Then a voice cut through the noise like a knife through water. 5 million credits. The entire auction block went silent. Everyone turned to look at where the voice had come from. At the back of the crowd stood a human man. He was not rich. He was not important. He was just an ordinary salvage worker with a weathered face and tired eyes and scars on his hands from years of hard work. His name was James, and he had just bid everything he owned in the entire universe. The slavers laughed. They laughed the way people laugh when they think someone is insane. The cargo vessel the Wanderer was not a beautiful ship. It was old and practical, built for work rather than comfort. The walls were metal gray and the corridors were narrow. The engine room smelled like oil and rust. The bridge had equipment that was outdated but functional. This was James's home, and it was everything he owned in the world, until today when he had given away everything to buy a stranger's freedom. Lyra stood in the main cabin and looked around with wide, confused eyes. She had never seen a space like this before. On the auction block and in the slave transport ships, she had been kept in cages or cells. Those were places designed to control and confine. This was different. This was open space. This was freedom, though she did not understand what freedom meant anymore. James watched her from across the cabin. He did not move toward her. He did not speak. He had learned long ago that sudden movements or loud voices frighten traumatized creatures. He simply stood and waited for Lyra to adjust to her new surroundings. After several minutes that felt like hours, Lyra turned to face him. Her violet eyes were filled with confusion and suspicion. "Why?" she asked. Her voice was small and broken. "Why did you buy me? What are you going to do to me?" James took a slow breath. "I am not going to do anything to you," he said quietly. "You are free, Lyra. I bought your life, but I did not buy you. You are not my property. You do not belong to me." Lyra's ears flattened against her head. She did not believe him. How could she believe him? Everyone who had ever had power over her had used that power to hurt her. Everyone who had ever claimed to care about her had eventually abandoned her or sold her or worse. She had learned that trust was dangerous. She had learned that hope was painful. She had learned that kind words always came before cruelty. "I do not understand," she said, and her voice cracked with emotion. "If I am not your property, then why am I here? Why did you spend so much money? You will want something from me. You will make me work. You will hurt me. Everyone hurts me." James did not argue with her. He did not try to convince her that he was different. Instead, he simply said, "Come. I will show you where you can sleep. You are safe here, Lyra. Nothing is going to happen to you tonight." He led her to a small cabin with a bed and a window. The window showed the vast darkness of space, dotted with distant stars. Lyra had not seen stars in so long. On the slave ships there were no windows. In the cages there was only darkness. She walked to the window and pressed her face against the cool glass. Her tears started again, but this time they were different. These were tears of something she could not name. Something that might have been hope, though she did not dare to believe in hope. James left her there with a blanket and some water. He did not lock the door. There was no lock on the inside. Lyra waited for this to be a trick, but no one came to harm her during the night. The next morning, James brought her food. She refused to eat it, certain it was poisoned. She waited for him to force her, but he simply left the food on the table and walked away. She waited for hours before hunger overcame her fear and she tried a small piece. It was not poisoned. It was just food. Simple food, but it was prepared with care. Over the following weeks, James introduced Lyra to the ship slowly and carefully. He did not demand anything from her. He showed her the bridge and explained how the navigation systems worked, not commanding her to learn but inviting her to understand. He told her stories about Earth, about ancient times when his own people fought wars over the idea of freedom. He spoke about revolutions and rebels and ordinary people who had decided that being free was more important than being safe. Lyra listened to these stories with confusion. In her experience, freedom meant danger. Freedom meant being alone and helpless. Freedom meant having no one to protect you. She could not understand why anyone would choose it. But slowly, very slowly, something changed inside her. She began to ask questions about the ship. She began to look at the stars with curiosity instead of terror. She began to believe just a little bit, that James was not going to hurt her. She began to speak about her family, about her mother and father and brother, about the home she had lost. James listened to every word. He did not try to fix her sadness or make her feel better with false promises. He simply acknowledged that her pain was real and that her loss mattered. He never touched her without asking permission first. He never demanded gratitude. He never expected anything from her except to exist and to slowly, gradually, learn what it meant to be free. One night, as they drifted through an asteroid field, Lyra came to sit beside James on the bridge. The stars surrounded them, infinite and beautiful. She had been learning to read the star charts and she recognized some of the constellations now. "James," she asked quietly, "why did you destroy everything for me? You did not know me. I was a stranger. You gave away all your money and your ship and your future. Why would you do something so foolish?" James looked out at the stars for a long moment. His weathered face was thoughtful. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft and filled with something that sounded like sadness mixed with hope. "Because I finally remembered what it meant to be human," he said. "For so long I was just surviving. I was working and making credits and thinking only about myself. I had forgotten that being human means caring about other people. It means sacrificing sometimes. It means believing that freedom matters more than comfort or safety. When I saw you on that auction block, I remembered something I had lost. I remembered that my people fought and died for the idea that all beings deserve to be free. So I chose to remember that, Lyra. And I chose to act on it. That is why I did it." Lyra looked at him, and for the first time since she had been captured, she felt something warm in her chest. It was not quite happiness, but it was close. It was the beginning of believing that the universe might have some goodness in it after all. The alarm on the Wanderer began to sound 3 days after they left Kepler Station. It was a high-pitched wailing sound that made Lyra's entire body freeze. She had heard alarms like this before during the slave transport ships, and they never meant anything good. She looked at James with fear in her violet eyes. James moved quickly to the communication console. His weathered face was calm, but Lyra could see the tension in his shoulders. He pulled up the incoming message on the screen and read it silently. As he read, his expression changed. The calmness disappeared. Something harder and more serious took its place. "What is it?" Lyra asked. Her voice was shaking. "Are we going to crash? Is something wrong with the ship?" James did not answer immediately. He finished reading the message and then he turned to face Lyra. When he spoke, his voice was steady, but she could hear the sadness in it. "We have enforcement vessels heading toward us," he said. "They are coming from Kepler Station. They are moving very fast." Lyra's heart began to beat faster. She did not need to ask what this meant. She already knew. The slavers had not accepted her sale. They wanted her back. They wanted to claim that James had stolen her, that she was still their property, and that he was a criminal for taking her. "They are going to take me back," Lyra said. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. She had learned long ago that good things never lasted. Joy was always temporary. Safety was always an illusion. The universe was designed to take away everything you cared about. "No," James said firmly. "They are not going to take you back. I promise you that, Lyra. I will not let that happen." But even as he said it, Lyra could see the concern in his eyes. He was worried. He was afraid. And his fear terrified her more than anything else could have, because it meant the situation was serious. James moved around the bridge with purpose. He was doing calculations, checking fuel levels, scanning for escape routes. He seemed to be considering running, trying to outrun the enforcement vessels in a ship that was old and not designed for speed. But then he stopped. He stood very still, staring at the view screen that showed the empty space ahead of them. And Lyra could see him making a decision. Whatever he decided, it was going to change everything. "I am not going to run," James said finally. "Running will not solve anything. It will just delay the problem. They will hunt us across the galaxy. We will never be safe. But if I run, I also prove to them that what I did was wrong. And it is not wrong, Lyra. Buying your freedom was the right thing to do, and I will not hide from that choice." Lyra did not understand his logic. In her world, the right thing to do always resulted in punishment. Doing the right thing meant suffering. But she was beginning to learn that James's world was different from hers. In James's world, sometimes courage meant standing still instead of running. James sat down at the communication console and began to record a message. His fingers moved across the keyboard, and his voice filled the bridge as he spoke into the recording device. He told his story from the beginning. He described the auction block and Lyra's tears and the slavers' laughter. He described his choice to bid everything he had. He explained why he had done it, speaking about human history and human values and the idea that freedom was worth more than money or comfort. He spoke about his ancestors, about the people who had fought and died so that humans could live as free beings. He spoke about how his civilization had betrayed those ancestors by allowing slavery to continue in their territory. He spoke about how he could not accept that betrayal anymore. He could not be part of a universe where beings were treated as property. "I do not know what will happen to me," James said into the recording. "I may be imprisoned. I may be punished. I may lose everything, though I have already given away everything I had. But I want you all to know why I did this. I did this because one being's freedom is worth more than one being's fortune. I did this because I finally remembered what it means to be human. I did this because we can do better than this. We must do better than this." He uploaded the message to every human colony, every space station, every ship in known space that he could reach. The transmission went out into the darkness like a signal burning bright. Within minutes, it had been copied and shared. Within hours, millions of people were watching it. Within a day, it had spread to news channels and social media platforms across human civilization. The enforcement vessels continued to approach, but something was changing. Messages started coming back to James's communication console. Messages from people he had never met. Messages from ordinary humans who were watching the recording and realizing what had been done in their name. Messages from leaders and politicians and scientists who were suddenly asking questions they had never asked before. How had they allowed slavery to continue? Why was the slave trade compact still in place? What did it mean to be human if they allowed other beings to be treated as property? Lyra watched as James received these messages. She watched his weathered face as he read them. She could see hope starting to grow in his expression, and she felt hope starting to grow in her own heart. Perhaps, she thought, perhaps this time things would be different. The enforcement vessels slowed their approach. They did not move away, but they also did not continue closing in. James received another message, this time from Human Command Authority. They were investigating the situation. They were suspending the enforcement action pending review of the slave trade compact and the legality of slavery within human territory. For the first time since Kepler Station, Lyra felt something like peace wash over her. They were not safe yet. The danger was not completely gone. But the hunters had paused. The hunt had been interrupted. And in that interruption there was hope. The courtroom of the Interspecies Commerce Council was vast and cold. It was built from white stone and metal, designed to look important and official and permanent. The walls rose high above the ground, and the ceiling was so distant it was almost impossible to see. This was where the most powerful beings in known space made decisions that affected billions of lives. Today it was where James's life would be decided. James sat in a chair surrounded by security officers. He was not in a cage, but he was not free either. He wore restraints on his wrists and guards stood on both sides of him. He had been arrested 3 days ago when the enforcement vessels finally caught up to the Wanderer. He had not resisted. He had known this was coming. He had chosen this. Lyra sat in the gallery section of the courtroom, behind a transparent barrier. She had insisted on being here. She wanted to see what would happen to James because of his choice to save her. She wanted to understand this justice system that the humans kept talking about. The council members sat above everyone else, elevated on a high platform. There were 7 of them, all human, all wearing formal robes. They looked serious and important and completely unmoved by anything happening in front of them. Their faces showed no emotion as they looked down at James. A prosecutor stood and began to speak. His voice was loud and clear and filled with certainty. He explained the charges against James. Theft of property. Violation of the slave trade compact. Incitement to rebellion. Endangering commercial stability. The list went on and on. Each charge was serious. Each charge could result in imprisonment. The prosecutor showed evidence. He showed the transaction records from Kepler Station proving that James had purchased Lyra as legal property. He showed James's message, the one he had broadcast across human space, and argued that it was dangerous propaganda designed to undermine economic systems that had been in place for decades. He showed communications between James and other humans who had been inspired by his message to question slavery. The defendant, the prosecutor said, pointing at James, is a criminal. He stole valuable property. He violated legal agreements. He spread dangerous ideas that have destabilized markets and caused economic harm. He must be punished severely, or others will think they can do the same. James's lawyer was a human woman named Elizabeth. She was older, with gray hair and kind eyes that had seen many injustices in her long career. She stood and began to speak in defense of James. She argued that the slave trade compact was itself unjust. She argued that no being should be considered property. She argued that James's actions were morally correct, even if they violated current laws. But as she spoke, Lyra could see that the council members were not listening. Their faces remained unmoved. Their eyes looked away from Elizabeth as she made her arguments. They seemed to have already made their decision before the trial even began. Then the judge, the most senior council member, held up his hand. "The defendant will have a chance to speak," he said. "Do you wish to address the council, James?" James stood slowly. The restraints on his wrists clinked as he moved. He looked up at the council members and then he turned to look at Lyra. For a moment their eyes met. Then he turned back to face the council. "I have nothing to say in my own defense," James said. "I did what I did and I knew the consequences. But there is someone else who should speak. There is someone whose voice matters more than mine. I ask permission for Lyra to testify." The prosecutor jumped to his feet. "The alleged stolen property has no standing in this court. She is not a legal person. She is registered as—" "She is a person," Elizabeth interrupted. "And she has every right to testify. The council should hear from her." The judge looked at Lyra for a long moment. She saw him considering, weighing the decision. Finally he nodded. "The Felinox will be allowed to testify." A guard escorted Lyra from the gallery section to a chair positioned in the center of the courtroom, between James and the council members. She sat down and her small frame looked even smaller in the vast space. Her violet eyes looked up at the council. "State your name and species," the judge said. "My name is Lyra," she said, her voice small but clear. "I am Felinox. I am from Felinia Prime. I am a free being now, thanks to James." "Tell the council what happened to you," the judge said, and something in his tone suggested he was actually willing to listen. Lyra took a deep breath. She began to tell her story. She described her family, her home, the day the raiders came. She described being separated from everyone she loved. She described the cages and the transport ships and the different owners who had hurt her in different ways. She described the auction block on Kepler Station, where she stood naked and chained while creatures laughed at her suffering. As she spoke, the courtroom became very quiet. Even the prosecutor stopped shuffling his papers. Even the security officers seemed to be listening. "I did not think I would live past that auction," Lyra continued. "I thought whoever bought me would use me until I broke and then I would die. I thought that was all my life would ever be. But then James bought me. And he did something that no one had ever done before. He gave me a choice. He told me I was free. He did not own me. He did not use me. He taught me about the universe and about being a person again." Lyra's voice grew stronger as she spoke. "You call this crime?" she asked, looking directly at the council members. "You call it theft? James did not steal me from anyone who had the right to own me. Nobody has the right to own a person. My people did not choose to be slaves. We were captured and forced into chains. James broke those chains. He gave me back my life. How is that a crime? How is that wrong?" She paused and tears streamed down her face, but her voice remained steady. "I have learned that humans speak about freedom. You teach your children that freedom is important. But you allowed slavery to happen in your territory. You made laws that made slavery legal. You made it possible for beings like me to be sold like objects." James remembered what freedom actually means. He remembered that his people fought and died for this idea. And he chose to act on that memory. He chose to save me. That is not a crime. That is humanity at its best. When Lyra finished speaking, the entire courtroom was silent. The council members looked at each other. The prosecutor stared at his papers. Elizabeth smiled at Lyra with pride. For the first time, it seemed like maybe, just maybe, things were going to change. The decision came 3 weeks after Lyra's testimony. The council members, moved by her words and the pressure from millions of humans across known space, issued a ruling that shocked everyone. James was released immediately. All charges against him were dropped. More than that, the council announced that they were formally challenging the slave trade compact. They announced that slavery was no longer legal in any human territory. They announced that all beings held as slaves must be freed and given full legal protections. It was a victory that seemed impossible just weeks before. James walked out of the courtroom a free man. Lyra was waiting for him in the corridor, and when she saw him, she ran toward him. For the first time, she hugged him without hesitation or fear. James held her, and both of them cried. They were tears of relief, of joy, of hope. But the victory came with a price. James had given away everything to buy Lyra's freedom. He had no money left. He had no ship. He had no prospects for the future. He was starting completely over, at an age when most beings were supposed to be enjoying the security of their accumulated wealth. 3 years passed. James worked long hours in the asteroid mining fields. It was hard work, dangerous work, but it paid slowly and steadily. He rebuilt his fortune piece by piece, credit by credit. Lyra studied engineering and physics. She worked part-time on mining vessels while completing her certifications. Together they saved every credit they could. Together they dreamed of owning a ship again. Finally, after 3 years of work and sacrifice, they had enough credits to purchase a vessel. It was not as nice as the Wanderer had been. It was older, smaller, less reliable. But it was theirs. James named it the Wanderer anyway as a tribute to the ship that had given Lyra her freedom. On the day they took possession of the new ship, James and Lyra stood on the bridge together. Lyra had earned her full engineering certification just weeks before. She was officially listed as the ship's chief engineer. James was the captain. But they both knew that they were partners, equals, friends. The ship floated in orbital dock, waiting for them to decide where to go. The universe was vast and full of possibilities. For the first time they had the freedom to choose their own path. "Where should we go?" Lyra asked. She was standing at the navigation console, her feline features bright with excitement. Her ears were no longer flattened in fear. They stood proudly on top of her head. Her violet eyes looked at the star charts with curiosity and wonder. James pulled up a star map on the main screen. It showed hundreds of systems, thousands of possible destinations. He pointed to a region of space that had been recently discovered. "There," he said. "The Andromeda Ridge. A new asteroid field was discovered there last month. Rich with platinum and rare minerals. No one has started mining there yet. If we are the first to establish a claim, we could do very well." Lyra studied the star charts. She traced the route with her finger, calculating fuel consumption and travel time. Her education in engineering made her a perfect navigator. She understood not just where they needed to go, but the most efficient way to get there. "It is a good choice," she said. "But I have one question for you, James." "What is that?" he asked. "Can I take the helm?" Lyra asked. "I want to be the one to pilot us there. I want to feel what it is like to command a ship, to make the decision to jump to faster-than-light speed, to take us toward our future." James smiled. It was the kind of smile that came from deep inside, from a place of genuine happiness. He stepped away from the navigation console and gestured toward the captain's chair. "Wouldn't have it any other way," he said. Lyra moved to the captain's chair and sat down. Her small frame looked almost comical in the large seat, but her bearing was confident and sure. She looked at the star charts one more time, made her final calculations, and then her paws moved across the control console with practiced grace and precision. The ship's engines hummed to life. They were old engines, not the most powerful or efficient, but they were reliable. They had been maintained carefully by hundreds of captains before James and Lyra took ownership of this vessel. "All systems ready," Lyra announced, speaking in the formal tone of a true starship captain. "Preparing for faster-than-light jump." "You have the con," James said formally. Then, more casually, he added, "Take us out, Captain." Lyra's whiskers twitched with joy. She pressed the jump sequence button, and the ship responded. The stars ahead of them seemed to stretch and twist. Space itself seemed to bend. And then, with a surge of acceleration that pushed them all back into their seats, the Wanderer jumped to faster-than-light speed. They were moving now, traveling faster than light itself, heading toward the Andromeda Ridge where new discoveries awaited them. Behind them, Kepler Station was just a memory, a dark place where broken things were bought and sold. Ahead of them was possibility, adventure, and a future that they were choosing together. Lyra looked at James from the captain's chair. "We did it," she said. "We are really doing this." James nodded. "We are," he said. "And this is just the beginning, Lyra. 3 years ago you were standing on an auction block, believing your life was over. 3 years ago, I was just a broken salvage worker who had forgotten what it meant to care about something other than credits. But we remembered. We remembered that freedom matters. We remembered that sacrifice can mean something. We remembered that one being's choice can change everything." He looked out at the stars stretching before them, infinite and beautiful and full of possibility. "We gave up our past," he said, "but we gained our future. And our future is written in the stars ahead." Lyra reached over and took James's hand. They stood together on the bridge of their ship, two beings from different worlds, partners and friends, heading toward an uncertain but freely chosen future. The Andromeda Ridge awaited them. New asteroids, new opportunities, new adventures. But more than that, ahead of them was the simple joy of choosing their own path, of living according to their own values, of being free. The stars stretched before them, infinite and eternal, and the wanderers sailed toward them with two beings who had learned the true meaning of freedom. Years later, long after James and Lyra had become wealthy from their mining operations, long after they had started a business helping newly freed slaves rebuild their lives, long after they had become symbols of what humanity could be at its best, beings would still tell the story of the man who gave up his future to buy a stranger's life. But James always corrected that story. He did not give up his future, he would say. He gained a better one. Because freedom, real freedom, was worth more than all the credits in the universe.